But making those kinds of rookie mistakes after doing hundreds of episodes, it's embarrassing, but it happens. It's one of those unexpected things that happens, just like in software. But it's I don't know what I'm trying to say, but those things happen, and you make mistakes, no matter who you are.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Developer Team. My name is Jonathan Cottrell, and in today's episode, we pick up where we left off with Dave Rael. Dave is the host of Developer on Fire. He's interviewed incredible people like Sandy Metz, Uncle Bob, that's Robert Martin, David Hinnemeyer Hansen, Ward Cunningham, and a whole list of others. He has 175 episodes as of this recording. Go and check it out at developeronfire.com. Of course, that link can be found in the show notes. We're going to pick right up where we left off in the last episode. If you missed out on that first one, you may end up feeling a little bit discombobulated or like you're jumping in the middle of the conversation, because you are. We cut the conversation basically right in half. So go and listen to that episode. Now I'm going to stop talking so we can get to the interview with Dave Rael. So another thing that I've learned from podcasting, I want to see if you've kind of felt the same thing. You kind of alluded to it a few minutes ago, but it's this idea that really kind of the buck stops with me, right? If I don't push this forward, if I don't stand in front of the mic, if I don't contact guests, or if I don't, ultimately create this content, then no one else is going to do it for me. No one else can jump in front of the mic and take over, unless, of course, I tell them to, right? But ultimately, the buck stops with me. If I don't get an episode done in time, it's not going to go out.
That's right.
People are not going to listen to this podcast because it just simply won't exist.
Yeah, it's that's really appealing to me, that there is no excuse, right? There's nobody to blame. There's, that's it. If it doesn't happen, it's because I didn't make it happen. Now there are a lot of circumstances around things, and finding guests and getting them to commit to a schedule. And I had one guest who, when I contacted him the morning of the show and said, hey, are we still good for today? And he was like, well, I thought, I planned something else. And I was like, really? Well, okay. And so those things happen. There are a lot of those kinds of circumstances, but
I've been stood up quite a few times, actually.
Yeah.
It's a very frustrating feeling. And that's actually a lesson that I learned. It's one of those, you learn how not to be kind of lessons. Don't stand people up, by the way.
Yeah.
If you're going to an interview, or if somebody has asked you to meet them and you don't tell them that you're not going to be there, and then they show up and you're not there, that's one of the biggest, most disrespectful things that you can do to someone. Obviously, I don't like to throw people under the bus. I don't think that's a professional thing to do, but certainly don't go out of your way to hurt someone else in their career, and don't go out of your way to not be somewhere, right? Just don't make the plan in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, that's just a complete aside, a momentary rant to a fellow podcaster who has experienced the frustration of sitting in front of the mic with the headphones on, waiting for somebody to sign on to Skype.
Indeed. Yeah.
Great. So this idea of podcasting, or really it's more about content publishing, right? You said you spoke with John Samez, and he was actually on Developer T as well at one point, very early on in the episode list. You can find John Samez, but we talked about that idea of branding. I want to kind of open that discussion back up with you, and really ask, what role does publishing play for you in that self-branding process?
Well, I think sticking to a schedule, is the first thing that comes to mind, that you give a message of being reliable to an audience. And, as that audience grows from dozens of people to hundreds to thousands, and, we'll see, ultimately where that goes, it's really ultimately saying, here is someone who is reliable and is going to, do the things that I say I'm going to do. So I think that's bar none, stop. That's the start and end of it. And then beyond that, there is that quality aspect, right? I think both Developer on Fire and Developer T are delivering useful things that people can get something from with every single publish, and that is something that sends a message as well. So that branding. John Sonmez is really emphasizes that being consistent, and that that's how you build a following, and that you build a name for yourself. And I'll add that John's his How to Market Yourself as a Software Developer package was instrumental in my deciding that this was something that I wanted to do. And I told that story on that interview with John, and I can tell you more about that if you want to, or can just direct people to that interview that I did with John Sonmez, where we talked about that. But there was one of the interviews that he had in that package with Pinal Dave, who is an Indian programmer, and he has SQLauthority.com as his blog, and he posts to his blog every day. So he writes a blog post every day. Wow. And I had him on the show, and that was an epic episode with Pinal, and talking about his dedication to blogging and what that has done for his career is it's really inspiring to hear about how he called his blog his master, right? He serves his master, and it really benefited him to do that.
Wow, that's really strong language, and it's really interesting to hear that people see this. Really, it's not something that you do on the side or do it because you're bored, right? That's not what this stuff is about. You can't commit to something because of boredom.
Yeah,
that's not going to happen. You're not going to do well with that. You also can't commit to something just because of the excitement that you get over the course of a weekend, right? Really committing to a publishing schedule, or even if you're not going to commit to a publishing schedule like Dave or Pinal or myself, building that brand for yourself, building the idea of dependability, or developing your authority. That's one of my main reasons for creating Developer T, is because I want to develop authority legitimately. Right? I want to actually explore these subjects and develop authority legitimately. And I believe that sharing this content, teaching other people, helping other people find success, that's the best way to actually develop authority.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, I think that totally. I would say, though, that you need to do it for yourself, right? To start with, because when you begin publishing content, and kind of going back, I guess, to the context of talking to the person who is embarking on this journey, right? Whether it's publishing content or just getting into the career and those kind of things, if you are doing this because of the huge audience that you're going to build, that's probably not a good initial focus, because it's going to be a long time, right? I'm on an email list for Jonathan Stark, who is he's the hourly billing is nuts software consulting guy, and value based pricing and all of that kind of stuff. And he was on Developer on Fire as well, and he just launched his podcast, and he sent out a mailing saying that in the first 24 hours he had 700 downloads of his podcast, or 700 and some, right? And I thought, wow, that's pretty awesome. He's got an existing audience and all of that. And I remember the first day that I released my first episode with John Sonmez, by the way, I got 22 downloads. Right. And so, it's humble beginnings, and it takes time to build an audience. And so, if you've got your eyes on the big audience, that's not going to be, unless you are a really exceptionally patient person, that's not going to be the motivation that's going to get you through that, up over the hill to get you into that promised land. It's going to take that you are getting something from this. Beyond just trying to build authority and some of those things. So by all means, yes, you want to build an audience, you want to gain authority, you want to have all of that kind of stuff, but there's got to be some intrinsic, something that you enjoy about, whether it's writing or speaking or some of those things, and there's got to be something there.
Absolutely. I think it's kind of the idea of a fad diet, right? Yeah. You have this energy because you see the end goal, right? You want to jump to that end goal the fastest way possible, and that's really not the best way to look at it. This is more like a long-term investment.
Yes.
That's what this is. That's the way you have to look at this kind of thing. Day one is going to be equally effective as day two, and day two will be equally effective as day one, but neither of them are going to get you to day 10,000.
Right.
Or, well, I guess a realistic number would be something like day 500, right? You're not going to jump straight into even success at any level. There's no guarantee for any success. The process of publishing is going to refine you, though, right? The process of figuring out the things that you actually want to contribute and create value in the world, not because you see the return on that value necessarily, but because you actually believe in doing something, creating value in the world as a function of just your life, right? That's kind of the core idea.
Yeah.
Building something that is valuable as a function of your life. Are you driven to actually, do something with your life or not? And it sounds it sounds like we're kind of minifying this concept all the way down to, are you a good person or not? But really, it's more than that. It's about actually taking the things that you believe about yourself and doing something with them.
Yeah.
Turning those beliefs into actions.
Yeah, that really speaks to my heart, because there was for years, I felt like I really had something to offer and that there were big things in my future, and I wasn't really taking action. Right, I was expecting that it was just going to happen because I had something to offer. Right, but it's not until you actually take action on that thing, that you actually do something that somebody can realize that you do in fact have something to offer. And as developers, marketing often gets a bad name, right? I've butted heads with marketing departments a lot of times, and I've always thought that they were kind of bad people, which was of course ludicrous. But marketing really at its core isn't all about manipulating people into buying something that they don't want, right? Marketing done right is having something worth having and letting other people know that here's something that will benefit them.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe it's John Sonmez actually that also says that if you have something of value, then you really should, it's like a moral imperative to sell it, right? Like
Yeah.
you need to be able to sell this thing because it is actually going to make someone's life better, or it's actually going to help them, further their career or whatever that particular thing does.
Yeah, if John wasn't selling a package for a couple $100 and I didn't buy that, and I didn't get that interview that he did with Pinal, and I hadn't done the blog commenting challenge that Pinal talked about in there, which I tell that story on the episode with Pinal and also in that interview with John. So I don't know if you want me to repeat that here, but I've commented on Pinal's blog and on John's blog and on the .NET Rocks podcast show notes, just day after day after day after day. And that was kind of the, Pinal giving that challenge was the genesis of me getting involved. And if it wasn't for that, if it wasn't for John trying to make a buck, then, I don't know what I would be doing right now.
Yeah, sure. Incredible stuff. Dave actually has a whole list of his episodes, by the way. We've referenced so many of them. I'm not going to list them one by one in the show notes because it'd be easier. 119 is the episode with Pinal. And then episode 1 actually is 001, which is June 13th, 2015, was John Sonmez. Thinking back that long is a long journey. I know I started Developer T in 2015 as well, back in January. And there's so many things that I've learned on that path, and it's really refreshing to talk to another person who has gone down a similar path in the podcasting world. So thank you very much for talking to me about the podcasting, the effect of podcasting on your career.
Yeah. I thank you very much too. You're welcome, and thank you. And yeah, it's a great pleasure, and it's definitely nice to talk to a like mind.
Today's episode is sponsored by Chartio. Chartio is built on the premise that your data is in multiple places. If you're like most businesses, you may already be using multiple sources of analytics or charging data for your customer charges. maybe even keeping sales reports in a local Excel file or CSV. This is a very common thing, and you shouldn't feel bad for not having your data all in one place. The reality is, trying to keep all of your data together in one place is really a very tedious process. It takes a ton of developer energy, and the value is not really commensurate to the amount of energy that you're going to spend. This is what Chartio does for you. It takes all of these data sources and it creates a single source for you to be able to analyze all of those key metrics that you want to analyze. Whether you are a business person or a developer, it is friendly for both ends of the technical spectrum. If you've had to struggle with bringing all of that data in yourself, then you know what I'm saying. Trying to wrangle a bunch of different APIs and bring them into a unified way of looking at that data, that can really eat up a lot of resources. Chartio will solve this problem for you. Go and check it out, spec.fm/Chartio. You can get a free trial, so you really don't have anything to lose. That's spec.fm/Chartio. Thank you again to Chartio for sponsoring today's episode of Developer Tea. So I'm going to switch gears again on you, Dave, and I'm going to ask you a totally different question. I guess it's somewhat related. We've talked about committing to a schedule. We've talked about some of those things. So I'd like to hear a little bit about your normal routine. This is the kind of stuff that that people who are listening to this podcast, they really want to kind of learn how developers shape their lives, how successful developers shape their lives. What is your normal routine, both for the podcast as well as your average day? What does it look like?
Well, that changes. The average day part changes depending on, am I working a contract currently, right? So I still do development consulting and contracting and some of that stuff. Usually those are remote gigs where I can just work from home. Currently, I'm actually working on site, so doing back and forth between an office, which is something that I don't particularly like and something that I'm going to try to avoid in the future. Currently my life is a little bit different than it usually is because I am going to an office. When I'm not doing that, I will split my day up usually using the Pomodoro technique. So I'm sure you've probably come across that. The idea is, work for a short period where you can focus intently and have no distractions and take short breaks in between those.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that's how I do my day. And rather than counting the number of hours that I work, I usually count the number of Pomodoros that I've completed. And I consider that, I used to think that, I'd try to do 12 to 14 Pomodoros. And when I do that,
wow, that's quite a bit, isn't it?
Well, that's what I used to do because it was way too much, right? Chris Winfield, he's been on the podcast. He's not a developer. I've had a few non-developer guests on the show. He talks about the Pomodoro technique, and he recommends, basically treating a Pomodoro like an hour. And he has this gigantically, stratospherically successful blog post about, 16 and 2/3 hours a week and getting more done than anybody else is doing in 40 hours a week. So I do more than that. I don't do a 40 Pomodoro work week, but a 12 Pomodoro day is way too much. So finding something in between there is my typical. I wake up early in the morning. It's not necessarily that I've chosen that. That's just what my body does. It's been years since I've used an alarm clock. So I get out of bed. I usually wake up sometime between 3:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning. So
you mean very, very early.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And of course, the flip side of that is that, I get my kids into bed at night and I'm a zombie. I completely, it's not like I'm, up all night and then, so I do get my sleep. So, but yeah, I wake up extremely early. And, I like to listen to podcasts. I usually lay in bed just listening to podcasts for a few minutes before I get up and, then, make my bulletproof coffee. So, this fat bomb that I have in the morning that gives me my energy during the day that, involves butter and oil and coffee and then just, hop to it. Well, I like to meditate and I don't always do it, but I like to meditate before I start digging into doing stuff. And then, if I have some interviews on the calendar and, I usually two on a given day. I used to try to batch them and do, like 4 interviews in a day. I have learned that if I do 2 interviews in a day and then I try to do more than that, the quality suffers. So, just
Yeah,
like you
your
were talking about.
brain can't handle it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I mean, it takes a lot out of me to do these interviews. As fun and rewarding and wonderful as they are to talk to people, I am tired and I need a break afterwards. And so,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I can line them up back to back, and I usually do that because I could do really like that. I can get those things done and then move on to doing something else and that kind of stuff. But it really does. It takes a toll on me. So when I do the interviews, that's that's what I do. And then I do the editing still with Audacity, and so I do that.
Very nice.
And save those files, and then I wrote some code to where I have a folder in my Dropbox that once I put edited files into my Dropbox, my code sees that there's new files there, and it will append my intro and outro onto the thing, and it will then it sends me emails saying upload the headshot for the guest for this episode. And so I've got a web page that I click on the link there and upload the photo, and it sends me another email that says come here to do the show notes for this thing. And so then I click that link and it starts playing the audio in my browser, and I've got some keyboard controls to where I can do timestamps and add links into the show notes and book recommendations. So, I've got some code that queries Amazon for the books and some of that stuff. And so that's how I do my editing and show notes for the stuff. And then once I submit both the headshot and the show notes, then that uploads my audio. Well, it does the tagging of the audio file. It uploads the audio file to hosting, and then it schedules my blog post for creation as well. So that's kind of my process of how I go through that. So I think I might have lost track of the question. You were asking kind of both about my routine and daily life, and I think kind of about how I do the podcasting. So I've rambled on. Does that answer the question?
No, it does for the most part. I was asking about, normal routine, what your habits look like. It's a big one that people are looking to answer for themselves usually is, what does my morning look like? What is a typical morning for me? What should I be doing? And really, I think the interesting answer that's emerging from you is that may not necessarily be the same for everyone, right? A lot of people say that waking up really early is the only way to be productive. Some people say that's ridiculous. That's crazy. So it's interesting to hear that you actually naturally do that. It's not something that you've chosen to do, but rather that your body is just kind of wired that way.
Yeah, my friend Ari Meisel, who is a productivity expert and another one of these non-programmers that I've had on the podcast, he's got this app that he created called it's the Less Doing Peak Time app, I think is the name of it. And it's available for iOS and Android, and you can put this app on your phone, and it's basically just a tap test, right? So it's just the timer starts and you just start tapping away on your phone, and it counts how many taps you can do. And if you do that test during different times of the day, his theory, his assertion with this thing is that at that time of day where you are at your peak and you're at your best, that's when you can tap the fastest on the phone. And how true that is, I'm not completely sure, but I think it stands to reason that when you're at your best, you can probably perform that kind of motor activity pretty well. And so that's one way that I would recommend to figure out what is your peak time of day and do those activities that require your maximum focus during that time.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I actually downloaded the app as you were continuing to talk about it there, because first of all, it's a very relatively simple app, so I assume it's pretty small. It downloaded very quickly.
Yeah.
I'm interested to try it out now. I've never really even thought about that kind of motor skill translating to my mental energy, but they really are burning the same kind of thing inside of me, right? Like my brain is telling my finger to do something, and so it stands to reason, like you said, that could be connected. Obviously, I'm sure the jury's still out on that one, but
yeah.
I would be interested to see. I like that concept though, the idea that hey, work during the times where you're going to work well, right? And for some people, working well is in the morning. There is some science to support that. Obviously, the science about decision fatigue is something we've talked about quite a bit on this show, but there's a lot of science that kind of underlines the idea of doing the most important things earlier in the day, before you have reached that point of decision fatigue. But some people also have at least anecdotal experience with the night being their muse time, the time that they can really tap into that creative energy, whatever is causing that. I'm not really sure. Maybe they actually do save some of that decision making power until later in the night.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Tim Ferriss talks about that. He writes best in the late nights and with wine. And I think there is something different about the creativity of putting words out and that type of content versus writing code. Right. I mean, I definitely I write my best code early in the morning, and that's how I do things. And really, I think if I have some coding task that I want to get done today and I can finish it before my kids get out of bed, that to me that's bliss. That is absolutely beautiful. Right. So, but yeah, not everybody is the same. And I think that's kind of the message of the Peak Time app is, try to figure out what that time is. And, maybe the tap test helps with that. Maybe it doesn't, but experiment is really the message there.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with the concept of experimentation. Really, that's just, and if you're not familiar with experimenting in general, really all you're doing is try something, take some notes about what happened, try something else, take some notes about what happened, and then compare them.
Yeah.
Right? That's really what you're trying to do.
No question.
So I have a couple more questions for you, Dave, and then we'll wrap this thing up. Going along with this idea of of habits, do you have any particular goals in the short term or in the long term that you'd like to share with the Developer Tea audience?
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of the things that I'm really obsessed with recently is just the degradation of the level of discourse that I'm witnessing. And I'm sure everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about, especially here in the US, where, this ridiculous election nonsense, has everybody hating everybody, right? It's, if you disagree with me, then you're not my friend anymore, kind of a sense going on. And I want to try to do something about that. It is, obviously an ambitious mission to try to tackle something like that. But I think, the business of the world of, that we cannot peacefully disagree, that there needs to be animosity. And I question somebody's, their intent, their competence, their intelligence, because of, some disagreement about a political thing is driving me nuts. So I want to do something about that. And I think that something is going to be that I want to start a podcast, which I've already done, but I want to do another podcast. Developer on Fire is something that, it's been awesome, and it is awesome. And I'm going to continue doing it. But it has limitations, right? I think in the beginning, it was wonderful for me that Developer on Fire was pretty rote. There's a script, right? A set of questions, and it's, different every time, but with a common structure and that. And I listen to podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience, which is just a 3-hour marathon of just no plan, just a conversation. And I think I wasn't ready for that when I began Developer on Fire, but I think I am now, and I think I'm ready to do something beyond software. So I want to create a new podcast while continuing to do Developer on Fire. Don't panic, any Developer on Fire listeners out there. I intend to continue this, and it may be not forever, but forever as far as I can see for now. But I want to do not politics. Politics to me is arguing about which narcissist sits in an office, right? I want to talk about philosophy, about the ideas behind really how we relate to one another, and how we can get beyond some of our disagreements and see each other as worthy of civil discourse.
Sure. Yeah, so you've heard it first on Developer Tea. that Dave Rael is going to start another podcast potentially. We don't know when that's going to happen, but or do you? Do you have a date in mind?
I'm thinking early 2017 is going to be the launch of it. I'm working this current contract that I'm on through November, and I'd like to do some of the legwork for in December, and then in the new year. I don't want to commit to a specific date, but early in 2017, I think we will see a new podcast, and it's not going to be a developer podcast.
That's great. So, how can people find out about it? Should they follow you on Twitter? Where should they follow you?
That's probably the best place. Yeah, Twitter. Although to an extent, I don't want to pollute my Twitter with non-developer stuff, because I think that's
sure.
That's what it's all about. And really, that's one of the things that's been bugging me, is that developers that I'm following are yelling at each other, right? So I don't want to be that very thing that I'm complaining about. But I will make some kind of announcement about it on Twitter. It might not be easy to find there. That's a good question. I hadn't really thought this through. Yeah. Let's say Twitter. Railyard on Twitter is probably the best place to find out about that.
Perfect. Yeah, and even if you don't hear about it from there, I'm sure that if I see it, I will retweet it, or I will send out some kind of message on the internet. It will be somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, definitely.
So I actually have experienced a similar thing. There are kind of brackets, limitations on Developer T, because I want to create content on Developer T. I really enjoy creating content for Developer T. It's a very interesting channel to me. But I also have other interests, right? I'm not just this kind of easygoing guy only.
Yeah, yeah.
There are other things going on. So I'm maintaining Developer T, the content that's on Developer T, and it's intentionally approachable. But there's other things that I'm interested in. I've actually considered starting other podcasts as well. So we'll see if that happens down the road.
Yeah.
Of course, there's tons of other developer and designer podcasts on spec. So, but I don't think it's actually going to end up being a designer or developer podcast if I do start one. So.
Yeah, something different, I think, is really appealing. And the other constraint about Developer on Fire too is that, that show is about the guest, right? When you come on Developer on Fire as a guest of the show, I am featuring you. I'm telling your story, or I'm facilitating you to tell your story, right? And so me interjecting my opinions on those things, I think, is valuable when it's relevant. But at the same time, I hold back on really expressing my views on things, at least to an extent, it's I think something where it's more conversational, and it's more I'm free to challenge things, and I'm free to really explore that ability to connect with people and find areas of common ground even when we disagree.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's fantastic. I'm excited about it.
Yes.
I have a couple more questions for you. Like I said, we'll wrap it up. These are the two questions that I ask all of my guests. The first question that I have for you is, if you could give every developer one piece of advice walking away from this podcast, what would it be?
So I've said, I have this mantra that I've introduced to my life, and doing the podcast is a big part of it. And the mantra is punch fear in the face. And so, the message, the advice is, get involved, get out there and do it, right? Give that talk, ask that girl for a date, or that guy, whatever the case may be for your particular gender, your particular preference, whatever it is, right? Don't stop living in fear, right? Because living in fear is the thing that kept me from being an engaged member of the community. And now that I am doing that, it changes everything. And life is so much better when you just ask for things. The biggest lesson that I have learned from doing the podcast is, in getting these guests, right? And you've talked about it. I've had, the Uncle Bobs and the David Heinemeier Hansons on the show, and John Skeet. Wow. I got to talk to John Skeet. It's absolutely astounding. Just ask, right? Those people are people too. And if you ask them to have a conversation, chances are they're going to do it. And so, punch fear in the face, get out there and do it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that, because really that fear, those messages of fear that you're telling yourself are well, this person is going to think that I am fill in the blank, right? That I'm not good enough to be sending them an email. And what you're doing by stepping out and sending that email is just as much as you're affirming to them that you are, in fact, you believe that you are, in fact, worthy of their time, right? You are also affirming that to yourself. And every time you take a new step like that, it's going to embolden you further to take new steps into the future. That's the only way to advance your career. You are holding the baton to advance your career, and not just your career, but also your life, your personal life. So absolutely agree with that. Punch fear in the face. I like it.
Yeah.
And the last question that I'm going to ask you, Dave, thank you so much again for being on the show. What do you wish more people would talk to you about? And this can be anything. It doesn't have to be developer related.
That's a tough question. I hadn't thought about that.
This is always the hard one.
Yeah. I want more people to tell me what they really want, right? That's, really along the lines of that message there, right? I've learned that telling people what I want from them is liberating, right? And I want other people to have that same experience, right? So with me, right? If you want something from me, please tell me. And, that's not a promise that I'm going to give you whatever it is that you asked for. But, knowing that you asked and, I am not going to tell you, bug off, go away. Right. If the answer is no, it's going to be a compassionate no. So, I think that's the thing, right? I want, honesty about what people are looking for. And, that I think would be the thing that I'd want most. And beyond that, I really like talking about philosophy and some of those things. And I have hesitated to do that. I've been fearful of the response that there may be. And I think rightly so in a lot of ways. But I think I'm going to loosen those restrictions, though in the right context, right? I think, I definitely, Developer on Fire is going to continue to be what it has been because I think it works that way and it's good for people. And so, I want different channels to talk to people about different things. And so that's I guess my message there.
Yeah, it's great. And I that message resounds with me as well. The idea of clarity, of honesty, of breaking down that barrier of, trying to manipulate other people. Manipulation, people can smell that from a mile away, right? It's very obvious, to the average person when you're not actually being upfront, when you're not telling the truth. And so more often than not, it's going to serve you better to be just as honest as you can.
Yeah.
Which sounds antithetical to a lot of advice that people who are listening to the show you've probably heard over the years of, don't show your cards or whatever that crazy advice that you've received in the past about, power dynamics and that kind of thing. The age now, the people who are in business now, especially the millennial generation and beyond that, we value transparency far more than we value power. Right. We value transparency probably more than we value money in some ways. We value transparency. So, and take that advice to heart, and not just because Dave is a guest here and we're treating him well, but because we actually want the best for you. We're talking on this show because we want the best for the people who listen to this show.
Absolutely. When you talk about manipulation, right? The face that comes immediately to my mind is Palpatine, right? Everything relates to Star Wars in my mind, but when I picture that senator that is jostling for position and ultimately becoming the emperor, right? That's what manipulation is, right? It is that twisted, two-faced, conniving behind the scenes kind of a thing where you see that smile, to your face, and then you see something completely different. And the interesting thing is that the Jedi are no different, right? The Jedi mind tricks are about getting somebody to do something that they don't really want to do. It's that same manipulative marketing practice, and it's counterproductive and it's destructive. And the openness it's just a better way to live.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much again, Dave, for being on Developer Tea.
Well, thank you too, Jonathan. It's been a great pleasure, and I really enjoy talking.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Developer Tea and for joining me for my interview with Dave Rael. Thank you again to Dave for coming onto the show. Go and check out developeronfire.com to see all of the amazing content that Dave is producing, and we'll be on the lookout for Dave's new podcast in the future. Thank you again to today's sponsor, Chartio. If you want to connect all of your services, that's things like Amazon RDS, Cassandra, Redshift, even CSV file uploads or data from Heroku, go and check out what Chartio has to offer. I'm just barely scratching the surface on what Chartio does for you. Go and check it out, spec.fm/Chartio. That's spec.fm/CHARTIO. In the next episode, we will jump back into the developer career roadmap. If you don't want to miss out on future episodes of Developer Tea, including the Developer Career Roadmap, go and subscribe in whatever podcasting app you use. It takes just a few seconds, and all of the future episodes will be delivered to your device. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, enjoy your tea.